We've heard the old adage that we have borrowed this world from our children. We haven't been given this world, we have borrowed it, and we have to pass it on. What are we passing on?
As per Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, urban India generates about 62 million tons of solid waste every year. Of this, about 70% is collected, just 20% is treated, and rest about 31 million tons is dumped in landfill sites. With the changing consumption patterns and rapid economic growth, this number is estimated to grow about, actually more than double, to about 165 million tons by the end of 2030. While we are all, yes, I'm including myself as well, more of talks and less of actions. Let's meet 69-year-old Mr. Dana Crider, the ex-mathematics teacher from Woodstock, Mussorie, who is trying to solve this menace of Mussourie's cleanliness. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, ma'am. I'm good. I'm great.
Thank you so
It's a
much for this
beautiful sunny
opportunity.
day here in Mussoorie, so it's a
Oh,
lovely day.
oh, lovely, lovely. I know. I can just imagine nowadays it's so chilly out there that a sunny day is definitely a pleasant one.
Our nighttime temperature is about 6 degrees.
Oh,
Daytime in
wow.
the sunshine, we get up to about 14 or 15. As soon as you're in the shade, that drops by about 5 degrees immediately.
Wow.
So
I personally,
very interesting, very interesting weather.
yes, yes, yes. So, sir, without further ado, why don't we begin by getting to knowing you a bit better? So, just for our viewers, we would love to know more about you.
Sure. As you said, my name is Dana Crider. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania in America. I was born into a dairy farm family. I lived there until 1979. My sum total of any kind of international experience was a trip to Canada to see the Niagara Falls when I was a kid. So
Oh,
anything else would have been only a dream. We shifted to India, though, my wife and I. We shifted in 1979,
mhm.
and we've been here most of the time since.
Oh, lovely. So, Pennsylvania, that's interesting. So, request if you could just share something about your life out there.
Well, I guess my memories of life on the farm begin with my father's reminder that I'm now old enough to take some responsibility. So, from the time I was in grade 4 or 5 until I left the farm, days would begin at 4:30 in the morning with milking cows, and my job early on was feeding the younger animals, the calves, and taking care of chickens. But I would then come in, get a quick bath, eat breakfast, and head off to school. Days were long, work was hard on the farm. So farm life was a real challenge at times.
Oh,
Yes.
it does. I'm sure there would have been times wherein you would have definitely missed it because it has its own plus. And now that we are in the cities, it definitely sometimes gets on the nerves. So, sir, coming to the social venture, Keane, as it is called,
Yes.
what is it about? How we would really love to know how did you start it or how did the entire concept or the ideation come into existence? So why don't you talk something about that?
Yeah. I think there's two particulars that need to be underlined with that. One would be that in 1993 to 95, there was a gentleman here working in Woodstock who was teaching earth science, and he tried to get students' attention to talk about the care of the earth. And one of the ways he personified that was that he built himself the reputation. He would carry two bags when he went to school from his home. And in one bag was his day's work, and in the other bag, he was picking up trash wherever he went. And that caught our attention, the school's attention, students' attention, other staff.
Yeah.
And it also coincided that looking back to what happened with the farm, one of my great concerns has always been the amount of dumping of trash here on the hillside. It has seemed to be, and I think this is anywhere in the world. I don't think this is unique to Mussoorie, of course, and I know it's not unique to just India, but many of us seem to be of the persuasion that if we have thrown our trash away where we can't see it, it's no longer our problem. And for many of those years, the trash was thrown into the nearby gully, Nala, and then just piled up. The other thing that happened in Mussoorie, there's one particular area in Mussoorie where there was a big Nala that everyone thought was safe and away from everything. And there has actually been trash dumped in that Nala from Mussoorie for the last almost 60 years. So you can imagine what is going on there. The pile of trash in there is probably about 12 meters deep in many places.
Oh.
And it extends down the mountain from where it's dumped. It extends down the mountain on the north face of the mountain. It extends down about probably about 900 meters down through the gully. And down at the bottom is one of the tributaries to the Yamuna. It's known as the Uglar.
Right.
So the drainage from the dump goes into the Uglar, which then drains into the Yamuna. And we know what happens with the Yamuna. It does not come out of the mountains pure, and it doesn't get more pure as it goes to Delhi. This comes back to about 5 of our, what do we call them? Our aims or goals of Keane. One of them, one great big one, is to put into effect that there is no dumping anywhere in Mussoorie.
Wow.
And we have been able to work with our local Nagarpalika. There is now no dumping in that location.
Wow. Wow. That's
so all of the waste of Mussoorie is at least attempted to be handled properly. And a large part of that, even Nagarpalika would say, if they were on this interview, they would say that a large part of that is thanks to Keane.
Wow. I am.
So in a great big ball, that's Keane. I think some of our beginnings are a little bit of the indicator of what we did. This gentleman who started it, Dick Wechter, he found 3 young men in the hillside who had no work. And he started paying them out of his own pocket to go into these nullas that I commented about, to pick up the trash and to segregate it into plastic and paper and glass or metals. So there were just kind of 4 general areas to try to segregate it. And then what do you do with it once you have it?
Okay.
And again, the norm would be you pick it up in one nulla, carry it across the road and throw it in the next nulla. And Dick would not let them do that. He said, no, we have to find a way to come to an end of life. So when you put all those things together, that has been the challenge for Keane. When you lump all this together, this is the drive that then we have to come. You have to find a way to have segregated waste that then you segregate even more secondarily or more specifically smaller categories, and then you find ways to move it on toward an end of life. And those are the kind of benchmarks within which we work. Where we started, it was not easy. We started in 2016 with 9 men.
Yeah.
And Nagarpalika knew what we had done in some cases, but they really wanted us to prove ourselves. They weren't going to put money into something that wasn't going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So in 2016 through 2018, my full retirement package from Woodstock School went into maintaining Keane to make sure that it was successful enough that we caught the attention of the local authorities And in 2018, 2019, we finally then got a contract to start working towards citywide management. So think of the implications here. The segregation part hasn't changed. In 2016, we started with 9 people. In 2018, when we got the first contract, we had about 30 people. Now we have 140 workers, and we're doing the whole city of Mussoorie, all 13 wards.
Wow.
So it's a major operation to do it.
No, sir. I must say, hats off for you to put in so much of thought and efforts into it. And as you mentioned, you used the entire money that you got towards retirement and used that money for this course. That itself talks a lot about you and your personality and the endeavor that you were on.
Yeah.
But while we are on this interesting topic of waste management, I think it would be helpful if you could elaborate about or elaborate on different types of waste that are there. I know you
Sure.
simply touched upon the wet metals, etc. But maybe if you could just tell a bit more about what type of waste are available, which of them are hazardous, what is the impact on the environment. Maybe it would be helpful for the viewers to know it better.
Sure. I think there's 2 or 3 things involved here. I think first of all is to stress again, segregation at source of origin is one of the first big steps that leads to success. So the way we began is that we asked people to segregate their waste into wet and dry. The wet would be anything that could compost, like your kitchen waste,
Yeah.
or even coffee grounds, tea bags, anything that would decompose.
All right.
So that is wet waste.
Mhm.
Dry waste is anything that is not wet waste.
Mhm.
So when we talk about dry waste, we're talking about candy wrappers and chip bags and
Okay.
cardboard boxes,
Mhm.
scrap paper out of your office, bottles, whether it's plastic bottles like shampoo
Mhm.
bottles or Coke bottles, or glass, no matter what the glass is, whether it's glass pane or
Mhm.
glass bottles, anything glass should be recycled. Uh, so when we finish our segregation, we do that segregating from what is given to us simply as dry waste.
Oh, all right.
So the dry waste is all that is then manageable in some way. What we do then with bio waste, which would be things like STs or soiled bandages from a hospital. First of all, hospitals are obligated to care for their own waste. So their hazardous waste is bio waste and hazardous together. And that should be incinerated or cared for by the hospital through an approved incineration process for
Okay.
things like sharps and uh, materials that need to be consumed by fire. Hazardous waste now, though, has taken on a whole new concept because of the pandemic, because we have protection equipment. Personal protection has become important, whether you're a health worker or whether you're the shopper. We know that we're supposedly all wearing masks to go shopping still.
Yes.
We won't discuss whether everyone does, but we're supposed to
Mhm.
be.
Yeah.
And then if you're in particular contamination zones, you're wearing full
Mhm.
suits for protection.
Mhm.
So those need to be handled differently.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
That was really informative to understand what are the different types of waste, or at the same time, how it is treated. So, if I talk about Keane as an organization, what are the steps you take as an organization, or how is the waste getting treated through you, if I may ask?
But it begins by each household segregating into wet and dry and hazardous. Once we have picked up the waste from your home, it either goes immediately into a truck for transport to our sorting shed for secondary sorting,
Mhm.
or it is stored in a cage that is nearby until the truck can come. And that storage becomes important because we want to keep monkeys or dogs or cows out of it, or else we have it all to pick up again.
Mm.
So the transport is a key area. We have 5 trucks which ply every day through Mussoorie and pick up that waste, segregated waste, and bring it to a secondary sorting shed. And then we have a whole crew there whose whole job is to spend every day going through bag after bag after bag of waste that comes from your house or my house. And hopefully the segregation was done well so that when they reach into the bag, they don't have coffee grounds mixed in the paper, whether it's newspaper or cardboard, or someone hasn't poured the coffee grounds or the tea bags into the aluminum tins. And the handling of it is a real challenge.
No,
That's why it takes 140 people.
no, I totally agree with this fact that one thing that you called out, a lot depends upon each individual, because even if we take small steps, we can just make a huge difference, because just by segregating the waste properly, we can enable the people who will be treating it or doing or putting it in a better manner, so that it won't harm the environment. It makes things easier for them. So would love to understand how the journey has been for Keane, where you started and how it has progressed where it is today. If you would like to take a moment and talk about that, it would be lovely, sir.
Sure. It's been a long road, actually. Dick Wechter was the gentleman's name who caught our attention, and he was here at Woodstock in 1994 to 2000. When he retired and went back to the States is when I took over Keane. And at that point, it was called Clean. It was a very cumbersome name,
All
but it
right.
was CLEAN.
Mhm.
And we registered that first NGO
Mhm.
in 2005. And our
Mhm.
first contract was simply with Woodstock School property. Instead of CLEAN now, we are KEEN because we
Mhm.
wanted to be wider than just Landauer. So the L was dropped. We are KEEN because it fits together more of a smooth name. It's keeping the environment ecologically natural. And a lot of our goals were grassroots and working up to realize how we could work on that, making our community, of course, still green. Uh, so plantation of trees has been one of our efforts. Picking up waste, of course. But a lot of the struggle was proving to the community that we had a viable model, because it's not the norm for anyone to pick up waste and then segregate it to the point where you can sell it and have only plastic or only hard plastic or soft plastic. The plastic has to be in 3 different categories. I'll get into that a little bit later, but you have to segregate it and handle it properly. Working with people who have been committed to me. I mentioned that there were 3 guys who Dick Wechter started by paying from his own pocket. 2 of
Mhm.
those 3 are still with me in my
Okay.
organization. One is my general manager, and one is a top supervisor in our organization. So there have been real commitment by people to stand by and accomplish the work necessary. Um, and those are the ones who helped to keep me going, even, as well as they were part of selling this to the wider community. Our local authorities, who now work with us, trust us, help fund us, uh, we had to prove ourselves to them. So we started out with picking up waste um, along a stretch of road that would have been about 3 kilometers long. And they gave us nothing for that. The only thing we got was that they agreed to let us use the user charges from the residences or the few hotels which were there to help fund us. And needless to say, that didn't pay all wages. But then you start small and you expand, you gain a reputation that you're trustworthy. You have to build your own infrastructure to be able to handle it. Now, what we're doing Nagarpalika has actually given us the building that we use for the secondary segregation. They're helping us move ahead on funding some infrastructure. Some of it will be funded from state environmental ministry through Nagarpalika. There's big plans afloat. When we started, this would be another statistic that would be worth noting. When we started, we handled about, I guess it would have been about 80 to 90, maybe 110 at the most, kgs of waste a day.
That's already a big number.
And even that was with only 9 guys. Now we are handling it closer when Mussorie is open and in season with its influx of tourists. We handle around 800 kgs a day.
Wow.
And that's only the dry waste. The wet waste is only that much.
Yeah, that's really a big number. And I was also reading some statistics which said the same thing, that the pace at which the economy is growing, the amount of solid waste that we all are churning out, it's going to be a humongous menace at the end of the day if we don't start looking into the problem right away. I think I really hope while there are organizations like yourself or like Keane, everybody in some shape and form, if starts realizing this, things can be much better. So, Mr. Crider, you did talk about the journey of Keane, how it traversed that difficult phase, and now where it is, wherein you've got local tie-ups with the Nagar Mahapalika and other municipal corporations. Uh, and you already have a very robust team taking care of all these waste management activities. So would you like to elaborate a bit on this, that how did this come into picture? Because getting into a nexus with a government body is a big task.
The first part that helped is that being here so long, I'm well known in Mussoorie. I'm big enough that everyone knows me. The other thing we did when we registered as a society, I chose people in the community to ask if they would join me because they were people known in the community. 2 are hoteliers or have had connections with hotel work. One is the owner operator of a sweet shop in town.
All right.
Another one is a woman who works with WHO and has been able to set up a nature reserve here in Mussoorie. So she's well known.
Wow. Wow.
And another gentleman is a retired border police officer.
Okay.
Anyway, different people that I knew would be good to have on the committee with me. And they have stood by me over the years. And the fact that I'm known, along with them known, has really been helpful in getting into relationships with authorities and officers. We certainly aimed to get on the good side of our chairman of our local board, both the prior chairman when we started and the current one. And we have very good relationships with the city authorities. Very respected both ways. It's not just a one-way street. So it's a point of trust that way. So building that trust with those people has been crucial, as well as the fact I mentioned that 2 of the fellows who started with Dick Wechter way back in '95, Ashok Kumar is one of them. And he's one who really must be named because he's still with us now. And that's like 25 years ago or more. And why would a young guy who has finished a bachelor's in business administration want to give up further pursuits when he had done well and commit himself to waste management and managerial level? And it's certainly not only the fact that we pay him, although we don't pay him what he should be paid.
I'm really glad to hear that you've been fortunate enough to get together such a strong team. And the way you narrated, I'm sure it is purely because of that team and that teamwork that you've been able to hone such strategic and such smooth relationships with the government body as well. So, Mr. Crider, we've gotten an opportunity today to understand how Keane started, to understand the challenges you went through. Also, you did touch upon the fact that how the team takes into consideration the segregated material from different houses, and then there's
Yes.
a layer of secondary segregation that happens. So maybe if you would like to take a moment to talk about that end-to-end process, that once that material has been collected by your team and the secondary segregation has happened, how does the management of the waste takes place from there on?
Okay. Um, we started out by selling it to kabardiwalas, who would then take it to other distribution, other collection points, to hopefully have it end up in some sort of recycling center. In other words, paper can be rerun into paper. We have never taken on doing handmade paper or anything like that. We have not entertained that. What we have done is try to pass it on to someone who would reprocess it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
All right.
doing paper is easy,
Yeah.
whether it's cardboard or radi, as we would call scrap paper.
Yes.
That's easy
Mm-hmm.
because if it's not glossy print, it can be dumped into the vat where paper is made, and it actually cuts down on some of the wood use to make new paper.
Okay.
So paper is the easy one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, rerunning hard plastic into new bottles is also relatively easy. Uh, but where you run into problems is, what do we do with plastic bags? And what do we do with multi-layered plastic, MLP, they call it.
Okay.
The multi-layered plastic would be things
Mm-hmm.
like cookie wrappers and chip bags and noodle packets. And
Mm-hmm.
this is back to some of the change we see. If you go back 40 years ago, there were none of these fast food items available. And now many of our households, especially younger people, we depend on that. It's the big market is noodle packets, whether it's Maggie or YY or you name it, it doesn't matter. We even import Korean noodles now. So, it's all of that is multi-layered plastic packaging to keep it fresh. That has been really the toughest of what can be handled. And I'll come back to plastic in a minute. Recycling aluminum and tin or copper, any metal, is relatively easy. Even recycling rubber from car tires or things like that is relatively easy
Oh, it's
because it's put through a melting process and then
mm-hmm.
run into new molds. Where you have problems is things that don't easily melt down and then get rerun. So plastic is much easier to make plastic bags from original petro products than it is to recycle plastic into plastic. So then you're looking for innovative ways to do something. And there's two stories I would tell here. One is one that comes out of Jamshedpur.
Okay.
I understand that if we did research, and I've
Mm-hmm.
done a little bit of this research, and I know the first part of this is very true. The gentleman who started the IITs in India
Mm-hmm.
chose to start his first IIT in Jamshedpur,
Yes,
and
that's
his intention was for education of the underprivileged. IITs are a lot bigger now than just the education of the underprivileged. I'm aware of that, but they started that way,
mm.
and they've grown well. I mean,
Yes.
I'm thrilled that they have. It's one of the great shabash points of India's education. We turn out
Yeah.
great, innovative technology, and that's marvelous. But I understand the same gentleman very late in his life got back to IIT in Jamshedpur, maybe in 2016 or maybe in earlier than that. I'm not real sure the year, but he addressed the passing out class. And somehow or another, he caught their attention that what he intended was not just a high cost, high profile education, turning out a bunch of engineers at the top of the line. But what he wanted was that engineers would have a classic education. You take a problem, anywhere in our world that we talk about classic education, this is where the old gymkhanas of Greece would have been. They weren't GYM nasiums, as in exercise. They were
Yeah.
GYM nasiums for the education. And what they would do is take a problem and work on that problem until they found a solution. I think that's why the Rubik's Cube has become a classic toy, to work on
Yes.
a problem till you solve it. But anyway, be that as it may be, I'm not telling you Rubik's Cubes. But this guy said to the passing out class at IIT, he said, we're giving you your recognition, your degrees. But he looked at the class behind them and he said, but I want you to try to engage in a classical education. And he challenged them to choose a problem in groups and solve that problem. And if you come back with an innovative solution, that their final year of IIT would be refunded, cost-wise would be refunded to them. That's the way I
Wow.
understood the story.
Oh,
Now, I don't know if that part's true, but that's the way I understand the story.
okay.
One group of 3 people got together and they wanted to know, is there a way to solve the plastic problem?
Okay.
They are the ones who originated shredding the plastic bags, the soft plastic, shredding it small and running it into tarmac, because the oil in the tar and oil in the tarmac adheres
Okay.
better to plastic than it does to stone.
Oh,
Most places in India still do black tar roads using dirty stone. Many,
yeah,
many
yeah.
PWDs don't get the stone clean enough to make a good adherence. So the roads that are repaired for Mussoorie or for Dehradun or for Delhi or whoever just before the monsoons usually have the same potholes again by the end of monsoon, because it didn't adhere and it all gets, the truck hits it and it knocks it loose. I understand now that around Jamshedpur, there's something over 6,000 kilometers of roads which have had
Wow.
plastic running to the tarmac. And that plastic in the tarmac is such a good topping to the roads that they claim they're not going to have to resurface the roads for 30 years. And the other story I'd like to share is about the MLP, the multi-layered plastic. We have found out, I actually had him here as a visit, on a visit to my house. There's a company in Noida that is taking multi-layered plastics and shredding it and running it through an extruder, a heat process, and extruding it and making lawn furniture and trash bins, tree protectors for when you plant new trees and you want to keep cattle away from it, different things like that. And it's not heavy duty enough to run trucks on it, but it's heavy duty enough that you can do paving stones for your walk. You could make your walk a color pattern. You could make it all gray. But the crazy thing is, if you get close enough and look at it, you can find little shreds of Maggie Noodle packets. Oh, Maggie Noodles made these paving stones or this bench. So, that kind of thing is a big step up from the plastic that we have been using in our lawns or our yards or our parks, where the sun breaks it down and about every 5 years you throw it out and buy a new one because it's all dilapidated or broken. So there are solutions possible. And I think that's another part of what we would like to do with even our own pursuits. Try to find maybe young, but at least entrepreneurs, whether they're middle-aged or young, they're not going to be old like me, but find entrepreneurs who want to find a new way to get into a business opportunity that could be something that is supportive and lucrative and sustainable. and using scrap.
Really glad to hear about this organization in Noida. So maybe I'll just Google them up, and that's really a wonderful thing that these guys are doing. So
Mhm.
I would really love to know that how did the pandemic hit Keane, and how did Keane manage the pandemic and come out of it in a successful manner?
It's been a time of challenge. Probably I don't need to say that, but you can imagine.
Yeah.
Um, Imagine that overnight hotels closed down and hotel workers headed off to their village with no job. Local residents, of course, couldn't leave. So Mussorie, with its population of somewhere around 30 to 35,000, we're all here together. And our work narrowed down to where we could accomplish our day's work in about 3 hours of the day, because that's all the trash there was to pick up. The waste was managed and was segregated. And we couldn't transport it to Dehradun or wherever to get it into the recycle process. So it ended up being stored until things opened up. Those were very tough times. Um, we have had maybe probably only about 6 of our hotels in Mussoorie who paid us a fraction, around 20%, of their original agreed user charges. They paid us 20%, and that plus the Nagarpalika support, which never changed. Nagarpalika stuck with us right through it and maintained our contracted payment amount per month. Plus the people living here, most of them paid their way through the pandemic. Many of them didn't have money. Uh, I would say probably a third of our residential people could not pay their dues. And we still made sure that we picked up the waste, even though it wasn't paid. The service charge wasn't paid. So now we're doing that service charge with the same 140 people. And I'm, I don't know how to, I don't, excuse me, I'm going to get, it's one of my emotional points, really. I don't know how to say it strongly enough, but we have been blessed. We have met every single salary payment, even though sometimes late. Some of our salaries were paid a whole month late,
Mhm.
but we have not cut anyone's salary. We have paid their salaries right through. We have not had any sickness of COVID infections. We had one woman fall and broke her arm, and another person was bitten by a dog and needed rabies shots. But we have had no one sick from COVID, and that's because they've been careful and caring for themselves. Um, I often say to the workers when I get a chance, and I
Mhm.
need to say it more often, but I don't see them all the time. I have not been the one who has been keeping them safe. I have not been the one doing the waste management. I'm just sitting back. I sign the checks because I'm the chairman of the committee, but I have not done the work. They have done the work, and they're the real warriors and the ones that we need to celebrate.
I
I'm
agree.
putting some pictures together to share, and a couple of the pictures are going to show our workers in full PE uniform because they were going into COVID affected areas in the town and taking care of the waste from infection areas. And even that way, we did not have any infections result.
I would like to mention this, Mr. Crider, that you know what? If your endeavor or your intention is pure, somewhere for those who believe in God and for those who believe
Mhm.
there's a force, somewhere that force or the Almighty makes things work. And just the way
He
you
does.
mentioned that
Yeah.
there was a time that you had to use your own 27, 29 lakhs to ensure that Keane is alive. Keane keeps on moving on. Somewhere that determination, that clarity of vision is seen by people around us, it's seen by the forces around us, and then they try to help us. So I must say and congratulate you and the entire team on that remarkable work that you guys have been doing. And I'm sure things would just get better as you guys move forward. So there, I would say, hats off. Keep up the good work.
Mm.
Congratulations once again.
I think there's probably two groups I should acknowledge publicly, and I mentioned one of them already. That's our local city authorities, the Nagarpalika. But one other one is the local chapter of the Nirankari group.
Okay.
Is that the right name? Um um, a study research center into religious philosophy, and their location is on Camel's Back Road behind the bazaar. But they have been
Okay.
very supportive, uh, and also the local Rotary Club and Lions Club,
Okay.
um, and a couple of hoteliers who've really come through and stood by us. Um, Gallons of hand sanitizer that have been given, and PPE outfits that have been donated, different ways like this. Um, and a group from Woodstock School, actually, who have made something like, I think it's now something like 35,000 masks to be passed out in Mussoorie for care of people. And of course, we got a bunch of those because of our frontline work. So, there's people need to be mentioned that way. Yes.
No, sir, definitely, definitely. And as I mentioned, even if you mention or appreciate in the simplest manner possible, that's all is enough to keep people motivated and keep them going. So
It is.
I'm sure these all have been an instrumental force somewhere behind the success of Keane. So, sir, if I may take a moment and ask, are there any other plans when you envision, or if I have to say, if you talk about the vision of Keene, what are the plans for the future?
Where we have slowed down is any growth in infrastructure. We honestly need two trucks. We need to expand our segregation area. When Mussorie opens as a tourist spot again, we know that we're going to increase the amount of material to be handled, and we're not ready really to have an increase of space at this point for that to be handled. Plus, we would like to move in ways to be more efficient in that handling. Right now, it's all by hand and bag or container for handling, and we'd like to move into maybe getting some conveyor belts where people could work beside a moving conveyor and pick materials out to
Okay.
make segregation easier and more efficient.
Mhm.
Uh, Various things like that. So there are some infrastructure things that need to be developed. Um, like I said earlier, Nagarpalika probably will be standing by us. We want them to be the owners of this. We don't own property that is uh, ours for the segregation process. And we're not interested in owning property. The most we have as ownership is the trucks that we operate. And there's 5 of those at this point. One is rented, and 2 are on what do you call it? EMI payments. So there's ways that we do need infrastructural growth. I think at this point, even the personnel growth is at a point where we can maintain for probably a year instead of having to grow larger with personnel costs. But of course, if things open up and there's more to do, we need to be looking at a way that we appropriately reward those working for us. So there should be a wage increase. So some of these are the issues, and I don't want to put money values with them because some of this I'm saying off the top of my head in the sense that I would only be guessing. But the infrastructure is a big one, yes. And the other thing is that we dream of the time when we can move into another area. We have been invited into 3 areas to bring like programs. we're not in any way ready to do that at this point because we're not a corporation that's growing and can go and take over the business in another district or city or town, what have you. But we have invitations where people are saying, you've done it well, come and do ours. And that is notices to us even by nagarpalikas or nagar nigams. So there's ways that we can grow. And that's going to need some broader support than what we can even really comprehend or dream of at this point. One of our articles of memorandum when we started was to try to encourage, I mentioned this earlier and I'll come back to it. We want to encourage entrepreneurial interest in taking the next step of helping with end of life for plastic somehow. We need a means to handle, if we're handling 800 kgs a day of dry waste, we have almost that much wet waste from local vendors and service points. And we would like to find a way to do wet waste processing, either by composting or by processing for energy reasons or results, but finding ways to do that. And that means that we're thinking much bigger than what we're ever thinking about now. Yes. So the future plans include that we need technical advice. We need, well, I guess one of the practical ways is that I'm now 69. So we need someone to take up the same passion and drive that I have had. Maybe they don't have to put in their own retirement money, but they really have to come by and stand in the yoke as such and pick up the load. I can't do it I've done it for 25 years. I'm not sure that I'm going to do it at all for the next 25 years. So, you know what I mean. There have to be a practical way of there has to be a practical way of the way we look at the future. So along with growth is advice. I think one of the ways we could work on that would be maybe having an educational program of having interns in and pick up interest that they could then take to their location and begin their own similar purpose and drive and accomplishments or things like this. So I think there's room for growth in just about as many ways as we want to dream of. And I don't want to limit that. I would like to think that that's wide open. I'd like to think that whenever my time in Mussoorie is over, that it's not Crider that is remembered, but it's the solution of problems that's remembered, because that's back to the classic education. And I've been an educator all my life, and I would like to think that my education can go on and influence another generation.
Thank you, sir. That's such a noble thought. And I would say, I really hope that through me and otherwise too, there are individuals who are listening to this. And if somebody shares a similar passion like yours, if they can come together, I'm sure this organization, I would say this vision that you've put into place, somebody can just continue with it. So, sir,
Thank you.
We've had a long, informative conversation with you. Unfortunately, we need to move towards the end of it. So I would like to request that if you would like to pass on any message to the viewers, to the society through us today, I would really love to have you say a few words to them.
To the general listening society, or to you as a group?
So,
explain.
So it's for the society. For us as a group, I'll be asking in the end.
Okay.
All right. I'll just repeat the question then. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, let's do.
All right, sure. So while it's been a lovely conversation with you, trying to understand about waste management and how Keane started, grew, and where it is today. Unfortunately, we now move towards the end of this. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this. So I would really request if you would like to take a moment and share something with the larger society through our means, so that towards the end, we all can go back with some thoughts to ponder upon.
Sure, I'll relate to that. I think the one great big thing that I would say is please do not assume that you cannot accomplish what I have done. I believe sincerely that if we all would do our single, simple, own little part in not dumping, in segregating waste, and in looking for ways to reduce what we use that can't be renewable, that we can make a big difference. I would challenge us to think of how can we support a non-fossil fuel consumption society. So how many of us will buy electric cars? I would like us to think how many of us can refuse plastic. How many of us actually carry a shopping bag so that we never receive plastic at the shop? How many of us truly take time to think through the implications of what we toss when we're driving? One of the most painful experiences I had was going down my path and seeing a car from the Punjab drove by, and I'm glad I don't know who was driving it, because as it went by the gate at the bottom of my path, the passenger window opened and a bag of trash was thrown out. And it was a bag of trash that was the empty Coke bottle, an empty Fanta bottle, and empty wrappers for chips, and an empty Maggie noodle packet that someone had eaten raw noodles out of in the car. So it's someone enjoying their tour of Mussoorie, the mountains, but then trashing it. Now, that's a tourist that time, but it's not just tourists. It's every one of us where we live and how we live. We sometimes forget that we can make a difference, every single one of us. So if that's a knowledgeable thought, a premeditated thought, I will make a difference today. What's that going to be? That would be my challenge, my great big challenge. The next big challenge I would add on to it is that in education, I would love to see even more being done to teach the next generation what is appropriate and what are the challenges. Because what I keep hearing is that in our homes, in our families, our children still tell parents what to do. Mama, I want a new iPhone. Papa, I want to go here to the park or what have you. I need a bicycle for Christmas or whatever it is. You know, our children run the world, so to speak. Well, if our children are the ones who then come home, Papa, why did you use plastic today? Mama, did you segregate the waste? Can we start a compost pit? May I have my own garden? So I think our children can make us change, but then they have to be educated to bring that change. Most of us listen to our children better than we listen to each other. So let's get the next generation. We've heard the old adage that we have borrowed this world from our children. We haven't been given this world, we have borrowed it, and we have to pass it on. What are we passing on? We need to know that we can each make a difference and that we can pass the difference on. It will be a different world.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Crider, I must say that while this conversation has been really informative, it has been really inspiring at the same time. And the two aspects that you said, education and that motivation from self within, these two itself are enough to actually make a big difference in the world. So thank you, Mr. Crider. It's been a real pleasure having you with us today. I thoroughly enjoyed.
It's been a pleasure to share.
Thank you so much. And I really, really hope and wish Keane and you and the entire team of Keane all the very best. I am really sure that now, at least through us, we can take your story to other parts of the world, to other parts of the country, and instill that feeling that, you know what, I need not be a Bill Gates to start up and do something really great for the world and society around me. So thank you so much, Mr. Crider. Thank you once again. And good luck for Keane.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's been good to share with you.
Thank you.